Albert Wesker was always a busy man. In all the years of working for Umbrella, and the few that he worked for Stars, Wesker hardly had the type of person to take the day off, and a vacation was outright foolish. It got to the point where even the mention of the word day and off, simultaneously used together or not, had just made him grind his teeth in annoyance. One incident in particular nearly sent Joseph to the hospital. Rumor had it that Wesker was sure that this was true, that Chris had bet Joseph that he could get away with saving the damn world more times than he. Just before anyone told him to shut up, Chris had managed to use the word 12 times during his first 30 minutes of his shift, while Joseph only used it 5. On the 5th utterance, Wesker was on what Joseph just as he finished the last syllable. It took Barry and Chris to pry the captain off the teammate, who walked away that day with a couple of scratches and a torn bandana. Although he was glad to be alive and nearly unscathed, to have thrown one of his favorite bandanas away was worse than he ever would received. Fortunately for Wesker, William had invited him over to go through some files that day, and while they waited for the arcade at the troubleshoot some computers that had mysteriously shut down. If Wesker had to bet, William was likely the culprit, and if he wasn't screaming at them or pulling their wires on when the screens would freeze, William was certainly smashing fists on the monitors of the keyboard. The younger scientist would never admit to being a catalyst behind one of those out-of-commission computers, but Wesker saw his fair sight of fights to say otherwise. Enrico will be here to take over, Wesker said to his alphas. Since everyone has been so encouraging as of late, I have decided to take the remainder of the day off. His neutral expression turned to a scowl, and then he saw the slight dip in everyone's shoulders. Evidently, it would give you all a break in return. We won't have the pleasure of seeing each other until Monday, but that doesn't mean you two get to slack off. Enrico will report to me when I return. So, don't think my absence grants you the permission to act like deranged animals. He pointed at Joseph and Chris, especially at you two. Wesker grabbed his duffel bag from his desk and patted his pockets for his keys. He started for the door, and when he reached it, he turned and added, Behave yourselves, and things will go smoothly come Monday. Wesker shook his head, backing now from the pointless walk earlier in the morning. He was en route to William's house, just on the outskirts of the city, hoping to actually get some work done without being at work. Although Wesker liked the transition from the lab to police station, he also felt that he could tolerate William's hair length more than the goons that made up Stars for as long as the baboon got his double shot of espresso in the morning. Turning right, Wesker slowed and he traveled down the winding street that eventually led to the cul-de-sac. He was followed by the curve of the curb and parked just outside of William's house. It was the moodest of family of three. Wesker figured a garage, a well-manicured lawn, much to Wesker's surprise. The driveway was big enough for 2 cars, and from the inside. Inside were 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a kitchen, a living room, a basement, and a backyard, with a big enough space to have parties and barbecues. Wesker wrinkled his nose at the idea of social gatherings. He hated attending to them. If it was an excuse just to be with gluttonous and back outright drunk at the RPD holiday parties, it was a show-off that he and William had been working on tirelessly, while being outright drunk at the Umbrella galas. Either way, Wesker was too sure to consume the party alcohol, to tolerate either the place and its employees. At William's end of the night, singing of the Moonlight Bay. Wesker shook his head and ran over to the passenger seat for his briefcase, before exiting out of the car and making his way up to the driveway. He rang the doorbell and waited, furrowing his brows at the pile of newspapers on the corner of the porch. Each roll had yellowed or its packages were torn at the very ends, causing Wesker to wonder, only briefly, just how long they'd been there. The sound of the deep deadbolt unlocking caused the blonde's head to snap back to the door. He could see the brass doorknobs turning painfully slow, and he sighed, loudly enough for the other person on the other side to open the door. But just, password, came the voice on the other side. Wesker rolled his eyes from behind the shades, recognizing William's poorly disguised voice. So help me God, William, he said with a warning. Buzz, wrong, access denied. I will castrate you if you don't open this. The door immediately swung open, revealing William with his arms open and an exaggerated smile. Al, you made it! I haven't seen you since yesterday. Wesker allowed himself to take note in William's kiss the cook up apron, and was spotted with several stains as he passed. Don't remind me, the older blonde muttered, and sat down in his briefcase to remove his blazer. Why is it so warm? It might have to do with your choice of attire, William replied as he closed the door. A turtleneck and a blazer for springtime? Why not add boots and fur to go with it? Charming. Well, I meant, why is it so warm in here? Oh, why didn't you say so? Sherry and I are cooking pizza. It's our first time making it from scratch, but I'm confident that it will turn out delicious. Wesker bent down to retrieve his briefcase. And I'm confident we won't get much work done, if you're set on to playing housewife, he said, with a hint of amusement, and walked over to the sofa to sit. Speaking of wife, where is your dearly beloved? The last two words made William cross his arms in defense. He was fully aware of the subtle friction that Wesker and Annette had. The day Annette started working for Umbrella was a day Wesker was transferred to a different department. It was obvious to William that the two would never have completely got along. Even when Wesker would go and visit the lab to see how far along William was on his projects, Annette would always be there to remind him, ever so stubbornly, that Wesker did not belong there anymore. And although Wesker would put Annette in her place, time and time again, he began to realize that the more he agonized the poor woman, the angrier William got. Eventually, Wesker was suppressed by the sharp tongue whenever he could just avoid William's constant whining. If you must know, she's having a girls' day, William said with a shrug. I told her she needed to get out. Wesker raised a brow, but he couldn't just look up from the flies when he took from the briefcase. How thoughtful of you. I'm sure she'll thank you for the tenfold for having her form afternoon of, how would you say, ridicule? Watch it. That's my pride of joy you're talking about. I was talking about with you, William, Wesker said, removing his shades with a smirk. How can anyone say I do to someone like you? It's far beyond my understanding. But what if we flip the coin over to Annette and... Enough, Albert, William said in frustration. No more talking about my wife, okay? Her ears are probably on fire right now, so zip those flabby lips of yours. Wesker's smirk formed into a frown. There was no need for hostility, William. A little back and forth bantering wouldn't dampen your mood even the slightest. But if you're going to react that way, perhaps it's best to get back down to work. Let this small talk upset you even further? The younger blonde, having to tighten its fists to the sides without realizing it, relaxed his grip and let his shoulders dip. His scowl slowly faded, and he gave Wesker an apologetic look. I'm sorry, Al. I didn't know what came over me. Wesker held up a hand. There's no need to explain. It was a sensitive outlet, recurring topic. Let's not dwell on it. He slipped his shades back on and focused his files on more. I'll take a cup of coffee if you don't mind. William remained where he stood, slowly digesting the snippy words Wesker had fed him with difficulty. Before heading up to the kitchen to start a pot of coffee, when he was alone, Wesker ran around through his hair and sighed, not enjoying the way his afternoon was starting off. There was hardly any tension between William and himself, inside or out of the lab. It bothered Wesker that the matter at hand wasn't fully resolved. He sat back into the cushion with the files in hand, crossing up his legs to prop up the wet papers against his knee. When he heard some footsteps on the second floor, he didn't look up to make any acknowledgement when Sherry came down the stairs and stopped at their base. Wesker waited for her to say something, because he was sure there wasn't. But Sherry remained quiet, only allowing herself to keep her stare on Wesker. After all this time, she's still terrified of me, Wesker mused, purposely shifting in his seat and clearing his throat before calling over his shoulder towards the kitchen. How's the coffee coming? Wesker asked, hoping to break Sherry's stare and force her way down to wherever she was heading. To his dismay, she remained at the foot of the stairs, leaning on its post, waiting to be acknowledged, waiting for Wesker to acknowledge her. Hold your horses. This isn't a cafe, you know, William said, pulling out a couple of mugs from the cabinet. Black, right? With 2 teaspoons of sugar, if you would. I'm feeling rather adventurous today. William mumbled something Wesker didn't catch, and the latter went back to his work. Dad always drinks his coffee with lots of creamer, Sherry said as she approached Wesker, careful to keep her distance. Albert likes his space, her parents would remind her, and eventually became the mantra that she replayed every time the shades wearing blonde was in her house. She wasn't sure if it was warning some sort, or was just a simple gesture of respecting others' personal space. Either way, it was good and bad to Sherry. On the other hand, she found Wesker downright imitating. She could feel the mood on the entire house change the moment she stepped inside, and the sunglasses indoors didn't make things easier. She wasn't sure if she was being watched or not. On the other hand, however, Sherry couldn't be more curious. He knew very little about him. Others he was in her dad's friends' colleagues, and had a taste for dark clothing, mostly black, drank black coffee, and did everything utmost precaution. From the way his clothes were pressed, the way his hair was neatly slicked back, in the manner of which carried himself. He is a man of his own words, at least when it came to her with small talk. But Sherry figured a man like Wesker wouldn't need to waste any energy on the extra syllables, he said, and he needed to get there and nothing more. And to Sherry it was fine her book. Wesker turned slightly in regard to Sherry and gave her a nod. I've noticed. It's no wonder he can't still be at work. I just hope he starts behaving himself when he's here. Hardy har har, Al. William returned with 2 steaming mugs of coffee, handed one to Wesker before sitting down on the love seat across from him. It certainly isn't the coffee that gives me the jitters, Slav driver. He replaced the coffee on the table and smiled upon seeing his daughter. Hey, Pumpkin, did you say hello to Albert? I was about to, Sherry said, playing with her fingers behind her back. Nice to see you again, Albert. Likewise, Sherry. William rolled his eyes. Boy, it's too bad they don't put you in social environment, Al, because that cheery tone of yours could have brightened the kid's day, he said sarcastically, and returned to Sherry. Pumpkin, would you check the timer on the pizza? I've got a feeling it's supposed to come out soon, and I don't want to take any chances burning the house. Wesker gave him a look, but ignored it. Sure, Dad, will you be staying for pizza, Albert? If your father manages to avoid setting the house on flame with us inside, I'd be delighted to stay. Sherry, William stressed, the house says our lives are at stake. The pizza, if you please. Really? That's great. I have so much I want to talk to you about, and it doesn't have to be about work, okay? But you get what I mean. There was a spark and hope in Sherry's eyes. Wesker could see the glimmer in her eyes fade away upon hearing her father's words, and she turned her heel and made her way to the kitchen. Don't linger on it, Al, William said, taking a note of his friend's thinking face. I know it seems a little rough with her, but she'll talk your ear off until she gets a chance to. Believe me or not, Sherry talks about you quite often, and you'll be here all night to entertain her inquiring mind. If you know how curious kids can be at that preteen age. William paused, gave his friends a serious look, and then chuckled. Maybe she has a crush on you. Yeah, she seems to have head over heels on me, idiot, Wesker muttered, taking a sip of his coffee. Now let's get started before I lose my patience and strangle you to death. It only had been 21 minutes before Sherry called Wesker and her father into the dining room for lunch. Sherry brought the hot tray of pizza on the table, the set of pot holders, and placed it into the center, passing out the ceramic plates to her father and Wesker. The latter eyed the floral placemat in front of him, suspiciously before Sherry got his attention. How many slices would you like? Wesker pierced his lips together slightly. I'll have 2 for now, he said. Sherry thanked her, and when he received the slices. Dad? I'll have 2 as well, please. I don't want to ruin my slim figure. There was a scoff on Wesker's end of the table. Then you better fire all the interns who bring you donuts, William. Your slim figure isn't what it's supposed to be. Sherry gave a slice and giggled, planting herself next to William, who narrowed his eyes at her. What? You'd think your dear old dad has gotten fat? William asked with a playful nudge. If she doesn't, I certainly do, Wesker replied instead, finishing off the rest of how cold the coffee was. A little exercise wouldn't kill you. William gasped. Oh yes, it would. Why would you think I take the elevators all the time? In the living room prior, she just stood there, awkwardly for a moment, before pushing her chair. Then Wesker turned back at her. She gave a nervous laugh. I guess I should be leaving? But Sherry, I thought we had much more to talk about. Wesker's voice was gentle, much more relaxed than Sherry was used to, and that eased her anxiety just to a degree. Well, sure, but my dad, she looked back at the push door, hearing the dishes being placed in the sink. Wesker sat back and regarded her with folded arms, causing the fabric of his turtleneck to hug his muscles. Doesn't it seem fond of you to be asking too many questions? I find that rather odd. For you see, it's as important to ask questions and ask all the answers. We suffer and endure this paradise we call life, and your father of all people should respect this. He's a man of science, and being inquisitive in it, as certainly the quality he possesses. I think he feels like I ask you something I shouldn't. You know, something personal. You're 12, Sherry, Wesker said in matter of faculty. I am pretty sure you know right from wrong, don't you? What could you possibly ask that would overstep the line? Sherry didn't answer right away. Instead, she slowly pulled out her chair and sat down, keeping her eyes on Wesker. Fire away, he said. He clasped his hands together on his lap. Why do you wear sunglasses all the time? Do they hurt your eyes? The inevitable question made Wesker chuckle. They are an extension of my self, concealing what lies within those without understanding. Those that try to understand end up opening the Pandora's box. The results are never pretty. He paused, giving the door a push glance. As for they hurt my eyes, Wesker continued. No, they don't. I've been quite gotten used to them over the years. Sherry swallowed hard. She was well aware that Pandora's box entailed, but what concerned her more was Wesker's warning. Could she call it that? That caused her skin to break out in loose goosebumps. Apparently the glasses were more than accessory to Wesker, and in fact they embodied his own entire self. Sherry almost wanted to smile at that. The thought of the plastic only being the only barrier between her and the world, and is what downright ridiculous. But even so, the dark lenses would have worked well enough to keep Sherry from pressing more fervor. Oh, was all she could manage. However pathetic as it came out, and nodded. It was then Sherry wished that she had declined Wesker's offer to remain at the table, suddenly feeling like she had indeed opened the forbidden box of destruction, or at least peeked inside. Come on, Sherry, take it easy. He's just trying to scare you. She took a deep breath and straightened her posture, her confidence making a drastic turn. Okay, since we already talked a little bit about work, what do you do for fun? Any hobbies? And scaring people doesn't even count. I'm the last person you come to regarding anything fun, Sherry, Wesker began, focusing on her once more. Though I suppose I enjoy putting stars through their paces several times for my own amusement, he smirked. As for hobbies, I'm rather fond of studying anything I will benefit me in the end. Sherry's eyes widened like teacup saucers. You like to study? Are you sure you're from this planet? Consider it a habit, Wesker clarified. After some decades, you'll start to do it unconsciously. It's like beyond of what's seen what the average person can see. You should try it sometime. Perhaps then you won't need to ask so many questions, and you'll have the answers right before your eyes. Sherry smiled. Yeah, I'll definitely try it. They were silent for a moment. Wesker noticed how uneasy she became when neither spoke. Unlike her father, who Wesker couldn't silence without threatening, Sherry was quite timid young lady. Normally he wouldn't waste a thought of why someone behaved like that, but Sherry, being Sherry and his friend's daughter, felt a twinge of what? Pity? Good, but enough about me. Let's talk about you, Wesker said as he cleared his throat. How's school going? Anything particular catch your interest? Sherry watched Wesker rest his knuckles under his chin and propped his elbows on the table, giving her his full attention once more. School's fine. Nothing new to report, other than dissecting a frog during biology class. Wesker's golden brows rose with interest. Is that right? Yeah, I was able to help at least slice it open, but once I saw the organs, I passed the scalpel to my lab partner. Sherry grimaced at and shook her head. I don't know how you or my dad could do it. Wesker chuckled, giving a slight shrug. It certainly takes some getting used to. I didn't always have the stomach for it either. But eventually you build a tolerance for it. You have to work with our line of work. Your father, on the other hand, let's just say he'll never get to let go of the scalpel. That's him, all right. You can see how we play Operation. Sherry threw her arms up. I can never win. Operation? Wesker furrowed his eyebrows. Is that a game? Yeah, you have to pull these, I don't know, plastic pieces from the patient. And the stupid patient has a big red light for noise if you touch the metal on his body. Sherry sighed. I just hate playing it because my dad's a cheater. That's quite a bizarre game, Wesker replied, still unsure of the concept, but against it asking Sherry to elaborate further. And what if your peers? I'm pretty sure you get along with them. It's just the last word rolled off at Wesker's tongue and he frowned, wishing that he didn't have to walk into the forbidden territory. Wesker had stared at the centrifuge machine and set the timer for the keypad. He leaned against the counter, listening to the machine hum. When William entered the lab with the scowl on his face, he walked past Wesker and began setting up his workstation for the evening, not sparing the older blonde glance as he marched into the freezer. What's the matter, William? Wesker said with a sigh. What makes you think something's the matter? William responded sharply, still not looking up from the virus sample on the side. The Riffingen machine came to a stop and the timer went off a few beeps. Wesker turned it off and removed the test tubes from inside. Call it a woman's intuition, William. William finally looked up and Wesker rolled his eyes. You're seriously upset about something, so you could do one of two things. One, you could tell me what's wrong so that we can get to work. Or two, you could take the day to clear your mind of yours. I'm the head researcher, Al. Because I will not have you compromise this experiment with that attitude of yours. Either you pick your face off from the floor or leave. It's that simple. William pulled away from his station, clenching his fists in anger. You no longer have the authority to order me around, Al. When you decided to become America's favorite cop, I took over as head researcher of facility. William replied with a scoff when Wesker furrowed his brows. And don't pretend like you give a shit about what's going on. I know we have work to do, and when it comes to being more complicated, that's when the stuff outside in the world interferes. That tone didn't sit well with Wesker, and it took every ounce of his strength to pummel William to a tile. Just what does the outside world have to do with you? Wesker seethed. The last time I checked, our world is here and the world outside is like light years apart. What have the possibility happened to change the perspective of that? William looked away, anger and pain seething into his features. Sherry's been getting bullied, he said, running a hand through his hair. Some boy at school has been making fun of her, and he's just even been physical. He calls her a freak simply because of mine and Nate's occupation. Wesker's jaw was set, and the muscles on his cheek tightened in anger. And you're just telling me this now? It just happened the other day, Al. I don't always need you to hold my hand when a situation goes wrong, you know? I can handle this myself. Clearly you can't, Wesker spat, gesturing to the door. That child has caused physical and psychological harm to Sherry, and still, nothing has been done. Why haven't the parents been notified? Or better yet, the goddamn RDP. I've already talked to the principal about it, and the RPD has been notified. So stop fucking yelling at me, Al. Like, you know the hell I'm doing. As much as I want to kick the shit out of the goddamn kid and his parents, I can't. Then I will, Wesker said firmly, and marched for the door. I'm going down to the station to find out where their family lives, and you're coming with me. We'll settle this once and for all. No! William rushed towards Wesker and grabbed him from behind. I know what that means, Al. We don't need to play any more blood in our hands. It's not worth losing a piece of ourselves for. Wesker didn't struggle in William's arms, tensing from his boiled anger and from the physical contact. He looked over his shoulder. Let me go, William. Why? So you could blow the parents up and leave the kid an orphan? So I could deliver what the parents had coming. I said no, Al. William tightened his hold. Please let me do this my way for once. I don't want anyone dying. I just want to set these fools straight and make things right. And if that doesn't work, what will you do? Call a PTA meeting? I'll leave everything to you. Those words seemed to have plain tune to Wesker enjoyed hearing. An exasperated sigh, he nodded. All right, you'll be held accountable for your words, William. My way is my way, and when it comes to that, you will not stop me. Sherry had said something Wesker didn't catch, and hearing her chuckle, he snapped out of his daydream and shook his head. Forgive me, Sherry, Wesker said. Care, would you repeat that? Sherry opened her mouth to respond, but at the sound of William's yelling the string curses on the other side of the push door. Dad, are you okay? Sherry asked, hearing him mutter a yeah, but didn't sound convincing. The footsteps were behind the door, and none too soon. William appeared, rubbing his left eye, holding 2 mugs of coffee in the others. Damn dish soap splashed my eye, he said, handling Wesker's mug. When he pulled away, the skin around his raw and irritated, as his blue irises was surrounded by branches of blood vessels. Doesn't look bad, right? You'll live, Wesker said, slipping on his sunglasses. But pray tell, what are you doing back there? I didn't realize you had to engage in combat to get coffee. I decided to wash dishes so Annie didn't have to come here to a cluttered sink, smarty pants, William said in a huff, earning a giggle from Sherry. My William, what a good little house husband you make. Wesker rose from his seat and gestured towards the living room. Shall we? And please take that apron off. William rolled his eyes and threw the apron over his head. Fine, it's off. Don't want to embarrass you or anything, he said, smiling to get his coffee mug. Too late for that, I'm afraid, Sherry. Wesker gave a nod as they left the kitchen, their mugs in hands, bickering to each other until they returned their positions to the couch. You know, I'm actually quite surprised at how much work we got done in the lab, William said with a grin, watching Wesker pack his files into his suitcase, and not having to wear a lab coat is little too much. We can't forget that, Wesker agreed, shutting his suitcase with a snap. It's been quite an eventful day, William, and I believe it's time to take my leave. William checked his watch and yawned. It's only 6:15, but it feels like midnight. He stood with Wesker and walked him to the door. Thanks for coming on such a short notice, Al. Really, I know how hectic your schedule can be. It was necessary, William. The change of scenery was rather comforting and pleasant. Something to break them momentarily a bit, huh? William shrugged. Potato, potato, Al. Working with you is always pleasant, no matter how many times you threaten me. Then I'll just have to try harder to make your life miserable. A smile formed on Wesker's lips, and then William chuckled. He gave the younger blonde a nod and opened the door to leave, when Sherry called him back. Albert, wait! I have something for you. William scrunched his face. Sherry would tone it down a notch. No need to blow Dad's eardrums out. Sorry, she said over his shoulder, and met Wesker on the porch. She held out a stuffed unicorn in her hands and smiled up at Wesker, who raised both brows and his lenses. The white unicorn was stitched along with the sides of his belly and with the thread, and its yellow mane and tail, though slightly different shades. They were combed down in different directions. What caught Wesker's attention, aside from the fact he was receiving the gift, was the cotton coming out of the socket of the plush's missing right eye. I made this for you, Albert, Sherry said. Just think of it as a thank you for being a good friend. I know it's not the best quality, but I hope you like it anyway. Wesker took the plush in his hands and ran his fingers through the yellow mane and back towards the forehead to poke the unicorn's horn. He gave a crook smile. It's quite lovely, Sherry, thank you, Wesker said, and placed the unicorn under his arm. I'll take good care of it, you have my word. What Sherry did caught Wesker off guard. She wrapped her arms around his midsection tightly, pressing her head into his ribs. You're the best, Albert. Wesker gave her a reassuring pat on the head, before William pried Sherry's arms away from his friend. Yeah, and don't worry about your dad standing there, Sherry. Just to remind me how the world's greatest dad mug is in the trash. Or better yet, maybe I should smash it over my head and hope I bleed to death. There's an idea, Wesker added. Good evening. Sherry and William watched him let go of to his car, giving one final goodbye as Wesker started his car and pulled away from the house. Several hours later, a few heavy knocks made Andrew jump out of his seat. His nerves were already on the edge from watching too many scary movies, and the sick feeling from shoving truckloads of junk food down his throat didn't help his stomach. His parents had gone out for the evening and advised him to keep doors locked and the phone close to him in case they needed to reach him or vice versa. The chilly air and the constant howling of the wind crept to every cranny of the house, made Andrew feel oddly afraid, and being home alone made him much worse. Against his better judgment, Andrew padded down the hall and stopped at the front door, slowly pushing aside the curtains to find a man clad in black standing on his porch. He swallowed and pulled the curtain shut, wondering if he should open the door to see what the stranger wanted. Another loud, hard knock made Andrew flinch as he took a deep breath and calmed his heartbeat. Maybe he's lost, Andrew thought, thinking back to all the characters in the horror movies who knocked desperately on people's doors for help. But this man in black, he didn't seem desperate. Andrew cracked the door open just wide enough to see his face. Hi, can I help you? Wesker held a cold dead stare expression as he looked down at Andrew, his eyes narrowing behind his shades. Is this the Smith residence? Yeah. Andrew's eyes looked over to see Wesker, if anyone had been outside. Who's asking? I believe I am, Wesker said with a smirk. Is your father Patrick home? I'd like to speak with him. No, he's not. My parents are out, Andrew managed, growing uneasy as seconds passed by. Oh, Wesker rubbed his chin and thought, offering a lighter tone. Well, then I suppose I could talk to you. You're Andrew, correct? Andrew nodded, his eyes widening at the mention of his name from a stranger. And I'm correct to assume you attend Raccoon City Academy down on Oak Street? Andrew gave another uneasy nod. And are you familiar with Sherry Birkin? Wesker continued, revealing rows of white teeth with a crude smile, when Andrew remained quiet. It appears you do. Listen closely, because I will only say this once. Sherry Birkin is to be left alone. You will not tarnish her good name with that foul mouth of yours, and the word freak will no longer be used in your vocabulary, and you will not come anywhere near her, or you will lay one finger on her. Should I find out that you even looked at her inappropriately, you'll be very sorry. Do you understand? Andrew nodded quickly at the verge of crying. Good. You are not to tell anyone that I have spoken to you, or even I was here, Wesker warned, folding his arms behind him. If you do, let's just say Mommy and Daddy will go on an extended vacation. Wesker stepped back with a smile, turning to leave. I'm from anywhere, Andrew. Be such a good boy and play nice. The next time, don't open the door for the stranger. Wesker's dark chuckle was the last thing Andrew heard when he slammed the door locked behind him before running upstairs to his room. The next day, but Captain, Pepsi is so much better than Coke, Joseph cried, throwing his arms up in the air. This idiot thinks Coke is the best outright, but that's BS. Wesker already putting a fair amount of effort into massaging his temples when Joseph and Chris stormed into his office to debate the soda giants how much the other. Chris was leaning on Wesker's desk with one arm, shaking his head in disagreement. You're full of it, Frost. Everyone knows that Coke is a billion times better than Pepsi. Tell him, Wesker. Both of you need to remove yourselves from my office before I lose my temper, Wesker said sharply. I have a migraine that doesn't need to be fueled by your stupidity. As if on cue, Wesker's phone rang. He picked it up and waved Chris and Joseph away. The two stared at defeat and made their way to the door, shutting it behind them. Captain Wesker? Al, you're not going to believe it, William said as he quickly added. I know you always tell me not to call you on the PD line, but I just had to do it. Remember that bully kid I told you the other day? Andrew's frightened expression passed through Wesker's mind, and the Bond couldn't help but smirk. I do recall. Do you end up speaking to his parents? Well, yeah, but things turned out much differently than I anticipated, William began. When Anita and I arrived with Sherry at the school, the kid Andrew, I think his name was, immediately started apologizing to Sherry, almost dropping tears on us, Al. I didn't know what to do. Anita and I tried to calm him down, but he refused to stop apologizing, and when the RPD officer came to talk to us, the kid flipped out and started crying. His parents had to step outside with him, but wow, the kid really had willies, Al. Perhaps he realized the damage he's causing and decided to play nice. Wesker cradled the phone between his ear and his shoulder, and he leaned back with his feet up. How's Sherry taking it? Well, she's just as happy that Andrew confessed everything and apologized. She'll be all right, Al. I think she's just shaking a bit from the spectacle. I'm glad to hear it, William. I'm sure everything will go smoothly for her for now. Yeah, and hey, thanks for making her feel special, Al. I know you come over quite a lot, and you guys never really talked, but your last visit left an impression on her. She says a little more social with us now. And also thanks for giving me your trust and having my back. That really gave me a confidence boost. Wesker looked over at the fluffy white plush planted on his desk, next to his computer monitor. It was my pleasure, William. Give Sherry my regards, won't you? I sure will, Al. See you later on. Goodbye, William. Wesker pushed himself upright, placed the backbone in his cradle, before taking the unicorn from his hands. He couldn't help but smile when he looked at the empty eye sockets, the messy yellow hair, how eager Sherry had been to give up on him, and how the plush would always remind him of his fragility. But one day, that would be a thing of the past, Wesker realized, and decided now the plush would remain, if only for that purpose.